Yo guys, I actually got my phone. Hello? Hello?
Yo,
Can you hear me?
yeah,
We have a phone.
this is a phone.
Person, say hi.
Already came on.
Hi. Oh my god. What? Yeah, mate. Tell you what, this is what's on Michael's Christmas list. They used to buy the red toys. That is us.
Who? Family of 4, under 47. Grab a torch. Welcome to the prison. First time? Okay, a couple of little things. When you're walking around out there, moving around, just mind your head and mind your feet. The torches, you probably already noticed, aren't that bright. So shine them on the ground probably is the best tip, but just be careful. The other thing is, please don't wander off while you're out there either. If you want to get off the tour, let me know on the walls. These are all the rules, there's a few of them, isn't there? Also, another rule. The place is a World Heritage Site. It's connected to another 10 convict sites throughout Australia. The 11 sites are looked after by the UN through UNESCO. The World Heritage sites look at forced migration convicts listed building in Western Australia, and it's also the largest intact convict built building in the Southern Hemisphere. So that's the main cell block. We'll spend a fair bit of your time. My name's Ian, so I won't get to know all your names. So if you have any questions through the night or anything happens, just give us a shout and we'll see what we can sort out for you, or see if we can answer the question for you. Now the other thing is the night tours really don't go into so much of the history. We do a little bit of the history of the prison, but not luck, we'll give you a little bit of an outline. It mainly looks at death, punishment and conditions in here. So the brighter side of life. Also, when you think about this prison, it was built back in, well, they started building in 1850 and operated really with people in it, or convicts or prisoners in it, from 1855 to 1991. So you get 136 years of people in there continually operating as a prison. It was only closed for a couple of months and then it operated, then it opens as a tourist site. So it's got a long history of pretty much a big percentage of violent men, because in here you had everything from serial killers, sex offenders, pedophiles, violent assaults, all the way through to white-collar criminals, petty theft and 14-year-old boys at the other end of the scale. So for 130 years you've got a fair bit of odd things or violent things happening in here. You also had people that weren't so violent, also you had people in here that were innocent. There was a couple of men in here who served, one of them served 15 years of a 20-year sentence and one served 5 years of a 10-year sentence. They took about another 40 years before they were finally cleared, and they were sentenced and found guilty of murder. The last man hanged here, who we'll talk about later on, a man named Eric Edgar Cook, was in prison at the same time, and he confessed to the 2 murders that those men were found guilty of. And he was found later to be guilty of those 2 murders, but these 2 poor blokes was well locked away in there for 5 and 15 years. So you had a big difference of people in there. The conditions in here are pretty ordinary from day one. When the convicts first built the prison in 1855, it lasted till with them till 1886, and then from 1887 to 1991 it was the maximum security prison, with conditions not changing much. It never has modern things like air conditioning or heating or anything like that. It's primitive in any way, and when you're talking primitive, it never had any plumbing, so that cell block, you didn't have fresh water in your cell, you didn't have a tap, you didn't have a basin in your cell where you could wash your hands, and you certainly didn't have a toilet. From 1855 to 1991 you depended on the bucket, and that bucket system was something you just picked up every morning, emptied out and cleaned it up. Someone cleaned it for you, and then you took it back in your cell at night time. You'd be pleased to note that little bucket you took your torches out of in a former life was used as a toilet bucket. So fortunately it's been cleaned a little bit. So you had terrible conditions. You had all sorts of... This was called reception. So this operated after the convict era. This is where a prisoner was brought prior to him being allocated a cell in the cell block. So they come through that door, they sit exactly where you're sitting now. The first order they got would be to strip, take off all their clothes, all their valuables, put them in a bag, tie it in a knot, hang it on the hook above your head. Next step was worse. They stood here and they had a full body search. So that was under your arms, in your hair, up your nose, in your throat down, in your mouth down. Get this door unlocked, we'll head outside, we'll give you a little bit of history, and then we'll go for a walk through the cell block and see what we can find. When you're moving around, just be aware these doors do self-close and self-lock. And if you wander off and everyone's gone and it locks behind you and we don't know you're there, there's another group coming through in about 15 minutes, all right? So just sit there, your doors should last that long if you like. Okay, follow me out this way. Can you hold that just for the next person? Good on you, just hold that door for the next one to come through. Thank you. Between 1850 and 1859, they first moved convicts into the southern end in 1855. By 1887, it got totally overcrowded, so they built new divisions. So that down there we can see that light on the right, that's new division, built in 1907. In 1889 they put up that big limestone wall next to it, and you can just see where the light is on the building behind it. That was the first women's prison in the state. That operated from 1889 to 1970, so there's the women's prison and the men's. They closed that in 1970 and used it to teach the men. They opened it up as an art studio, so they taught them art and used it as an interview area. But these two cell blocks operate through to 1991. Now the only real changes they made to the prison was all to do with security. So they added things like gun posts. So you got one down there, got one over your head, and there's another one, another 5 dotted around the walls. They're initially for 8 hours, and they were the only ones that had keys. So they would unlock the doors and lock them behind them. They'd then sit up there or stand up there for 8 hours. And if anyone else wanted to go up there, they had to radio the man in the gun tower. He'd lower down the keys to them. Once he was happy and identified them, then he'd lower them down on, very technical, on a bit of rope, and they could unlock and go up there. And then eventually they changed them and they made them 24 hours a day. And they were never that popular a place to work in because they were odd. This one, for instance, we'll talk about it in a sec as well in a bit more detail. It always had noises around the base, and the man up there would radio the main gatehouse, and they'd send officers out, and they'd run out with their torches and shine them around, and they could never find anything. It had unusual things happening, like the windows would open and close by themselves, or the furniture would move around, the radio would go on and off, the kettle would boil by itself. So they didn't like working up there. It was never the most popular job to have. And after an event in the mid-1970s, when this prison officer told his tale, a lot of others came forward and started to relate that they had seen similar things throughout the prison. In about 1974, there was a prison officer up there and his name was Sean Sheriff. He'd been working in the prison for about 15 years, so he knew the ropes, he knew the prisoners, he knew how it all worked. He didn't like and didn't want to go and work in the gun tower, but that's his duty for that night. He's going to be locked up there from midnight till 8 a.m. in the morning, and he will do his shift up there. He locks everything behind him as he goes up the stairs, unlocks it, goes in, starts filling out the necessary paperwork, has a cup of tea, and then proceeds to do what he'll do many times during the night. He will walk out that gun tower, he will walk along the walkway, shining his torch around, having a look, make sure no one's escaping. He's got his rifle over his shoulder, and he just return. And he'll do that countless times doing that 8-hour shift, making sure nothing's happening. Now at about 2 a.m. in the morning, he left the gun tower and he walked out to the end of the walkway about where the gate is, shines his torch around, nothing happening, walks back into the gun tower, and he's down at his desk. He's got the radio on, he's making a cup of tea, he's doing some work, and he's starting to get an overwhelming feeling that there's someone else in there with him. And he's fighting it, and he's thinking about it, and he's going, hang on, be logical, you've got the keys, you haven't given them to anyone, how can anyone else be up here? And he continues to work, but the feeling gets that strong. He later said he was completely overcome. He's starting to feel nauseous, and he's a bit worried about the character who may be in there with him. Eventually, he turns around, he gets his rifle, has a look over his left shoulder, and at that northern end of that gun tower, there's a figure standing there. Old man, grey beard, long hair, dark coat on. Sheriff grabs his rifle, runs all the way through the gun tower and out to the end of the walkway and stayed there. It started to rain, he still stayed there, and he stayed there till 8 o'clock in the morning. He never went back inside. He eventually goes back inside at the end of the shift at 8 a.m. No one's there, of course. He comes down the stairs, hands his keys in and goes home. He's got a wife and children, and he says to them, I've put in for a transfer. They've said that they'll grant me the transfer about 6-9 months time, and they'll send me down to Albany Regional Prison. He said, I'm going to ask them to bring it forward because I can't work in the prison anymore because I will not go up that gun tower. And he said, if they don't bring it forward, I'll resign. He comes back in the next morning, hands in the keys, talks to the superintendent, and they put forward his suggestion, and the authorities go along with him, and they bring his transfer forward, and they ship him off to Albany Regional Prison, where he spends the rest of his working life until his retirement. On retirement, he returns here. He gladly will go for a walk with older colleagues through the prison. He visits it regularly. He was back here late last year, about November, and went for a walk through and spoke with us, but he flatly refuses to go up there. And in fact, Channel 9 offered him money to go up there and do an interview about haunted places in Perth. And he said, no, you can give me $1 million, I will not go up there. I'll never set foot in that gun tower again. And yeah, will totally come to the prison and spend a good deal of his time working in Albany Regional Prison. Righto, through this way and we'll go inside.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
First time?
Yeah.